Hey everyone, Token Dave over here. Dorky Token Black Guy who's just trying to get by. And welcome to another edition of the Token Topics. Here, I basically talk about one particular subject matter for a given period of time. Now, I need you guys to keep in mind that everything that I say regarding to the Token Topics are my personal opinion. Alright? This is nothing based on complete fact. These are just opinions that I've come across based upon things that I have experienced, seen, heard, and read. Okay? So, just need to disclaim this. Controversial alert! Controversial alert! Controversial alert! Controversial alert! This topic is going to be pretty controversial, and it's to a degree piggybacking off of a video that I made 2 months ago regarding the complexity of the relationship between black folk and the Japanese. And let's be honest. I have to be honest. I have to be very honest. Asians and blacks, they have not the greatest relationship, and it's usually that basically Asians are more hesitant when it comes to interacting and engaging with black folk as opposed to black folk, because most black folk they like interacting with people of Asian descent, but Asians, they kind of view most black people differently. They view black as something that's either mysterious or something that's always trying to hide something, or negative. Or to top it off, they view them as people that are not as smart and everything, because if you're darker skinned, you've been out doing manual labor more, and basically Asians tend to prefer people that are lighter skinned, because people that are lighter skinned, they work in offices more and they end up having more money, But despite this complication that basically blacks and the Japanese have, one thing that I gotta admit, with the exception of the Philippines, and the Filipinos, basically Japan, of the Oriental Asian countries, they're actually a lot more open and a lot more accepting to black folk compared to the other countries. And that is, and especially when it comes to China, which basically one of the reasons why, Japan has their culture is because they pretty much adopted most of the Japanese culture way, way before the 1400s and everything, because of geographic location, But then after a time, Japan actually ended up creating their own ways of thinking and their own culture, vastly different compared to China. But still, the root of everything was from China. And the way the Chinese, currently view blacks and African Americans, not very favorably. Now, before you go any further, this is China themselves. This is China, the country itself. This is not every Chinese person. And especially if you're talking with the ABC, an American-born Chinese. An American-born Chinese tend to not hold the same prejudices against African Americans or blacks as much. But China, the Chinese government and the powerful people of China, they tend to view black folk not in the most favorable light. And that was apparent with basically the opening weekend of Black Panther. Now, the Chinese film market is actually the second largest film market in the world. We can't dispute that, as much as I have a beef with China, given their, the way their economy and their country is run, which I will talk about brief in a few moments. It can't be ignored that China, basically, movies in general, they basically go to China. When a movie's released in the West, they end up releasing it in China, normally either a little bit later, to try to see how much money they make, And the Chinese tend to like watching the American movies a little bit more. So basically, when a movie gets a sequel or something, where like this movie is so freaking bad and everything, but if it makes money in China, shit, that movie gets a sequel. Why do you think the Transformers movies got so far? Why do you think they greenlit that sequel for Pacific Rim? Why do you think Fast and Furious did so well? You know, but the thing is though, one thing about China is that basically Black Panther, they chose to release it in China last for a reason, because Chinese market is normally not favorable to movies with black leads. And despite the huge opening that Black Panther had, like freaking 65 million, the reviews were not so great. And the thing is, it's not only that the reviews are not so great, the reviews were kind of racist. Like, people saying that there were too many black people in the screen when the black people were fighting and everything. It hurt their eyes or anything, or, they were having a hard time telling who was fighting. And, yeah, racist much. And China is notorious for their racism against black folk and everything. Recently, before that, one of the huge things that they have was controversial, was a commercial where a Chinese girl was in front of a black guy, and the black guy, they hyped up that the black guy was like dirty and unclean and everything. So she tossed him in a washing machine, and he comes out white looking. Well, really Chinese and everything, light skinned Chinese, but still, it's like, damn, yeah, China. Yeah, not doing much. Yeah, y'all got some racial issue. People in China, your government and your powerful people got some racial issues against black folk. But the people can't really do much about that, because we have to remember, China is still a communist country. And they're more of a communist authoritarian now, given that their prime minister decided to be the ruler of China for the rest of his life, which basically, yeah. And this is like, this is those old communists from like, basically after World War II, communism, authoritarian. So that's what the people are dealing with. So what a lot of the powerful people will say about black folk or how they will act, it's not a reflection off of every person from China. But, there's always a hostility in, like, black neighborhoods and everything when it comes to the Chinese, particularly because they make a lot of money off of us with their restaurants going into, like, basically a minority community, or a predominantly black community and everything. And basically they tend to act really, antagonistic towards us and everything, and that's not all of them though. It's funny, like, the Chinese restaurant that I go to at times, in my block, the lady at the front, she like the first 2 months she was really apprehensive towards me. Third month, she just then looked at me like blah. And actually pretty recently, it was funny, in the beginning of the year, she actually asked if I wanted a calendar. I'm like, okay, cool. And then, like, I ordered there. I actually just ordered from there a few minutes ago. And then she's like, where have you been? You don't order from me anymore. And I had to tell her about my health issues and everything. But still, so there has always been that hostility between, Chinese and the black and African Americans and blacks. And mostly it's because, like, Chinese folk don't really view black people in the most positive light, and then to top it off, some of the ABCs, American-born Chinese, have that sentiment as well too. Now, basically, I can't say that about every Chinese person, because I have to realize one other thing, Every person is like an asshole. Everyone has one. Same thing about opinions. Everyone has opinions, So that's my general consensus of, like, how China views black people overall. you know. But that's just a generalization. That is not completely true because there are a lot of individual people that actually view black folk in a different light. Hell, it's very funny. When I was learning Mandarin Chinese when I first started college, my best friend, my best friend in my first couple of years of college, the very first time I went to college, it was this one dude named Quang and this one dude named Nian, and basically we would always hang out after class. We would be going to Taco Bell, we'd be eating, we'd go to like the arcade in Chinatown and play video games, or we would actually end up going to Times Square and or Washington Square Park and try to scope out some girls and everything. Just sucks they couldn't even get. It just sucks because Nian and everything, he had that nerdy glasses Asian guy look, but a lot of chicks liked him and everything, and I was like, dude, really get the digits, but but pretty much basically, yeah. So my point of view is that basically some of the things people in China said about Black Panther and everything, that's just the critics and that's just the government officials from their narrow-mindedness. That's not a representation of all the people from China or everyone that is of Chinese descent. So, agree? Disagree? You got any other opinions about this topic? Drop them below. Give me a like. Follow me on Facebook at Token Dave or on Twitter at Token Dave 80. Subscribe and ring that bell so you know when a new video loads. But until then, this has been Token Dave, a dorky token black guy who's just trying to get by. I'll catch all of you later.